All right, we will get things moving. Great to see everybody in person. Looks like, do we have everybody here? 1, 2, 3, 4. Who are we missing?
Thomas is missing.
Yep, Thomas Finley is not here today. So I believe everybody else is here. So we will, that means we've got a quorum. Before we open the meeting, I think we need to do a agenda amendment, item 3B under new business. The applicant has requested to continue that consideration. Do we have a motion to amend the agenda to remove item 3B? Motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Quick question.
Oh, excuse me.
Is there a date it's deferred to, or it's just whenever? Next month. Next month, and then possibly. Okay, so it's deferred until the next month. Next meeting. That should be a motion. An amendment to the motion.
Yes.
Deferred to.
Okay, so I'll make a substitute motion that we remove item 3B and then defer it to next month. Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? None? All in favor? And please let the record state that Mr. Finley is now present.
Thank you.
How's it going?
Good, you all right?
Good to see you. Yeah.
Excellent.
All right, first item on the agenda is adoption of the minutes from the June 2nd meeting. Any questions about those minutes? Do we have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes of June 2nd meeting. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you for that. Moving on to public comments. Is anyone signed up for public comments today? Okay. We will move on to new business item 3A, consider recommendation on TA 22-06. And I will turn the floor over to staff and the applicant.
Was submitted by the applicant DDRTC Birkdale Village. And this is to go along with their rezoning plan, with rezoning 22-01. And what you see here is the site plan for what they are proposing. The addition of a commercial use building on the left, a proposed hotel, and residential units along with revamped parking structures. So that's what the purpose of this text amendment is for, is to address these structures. The text amendment's goals is to increase the height, the permitted height for commercial uses in the pedestrian-oriented development to not exceed 145 feet, and that's only within highway commercial zoning district. And it's being proposed as Article 9.63. And it will require a special use permit. You can see that language to the right. As well, they are trying to increase the permitted height for hotels and pedestrian-oriented developments to not exceed 145 feet. And just like commercial uses, it will require a special use permit. As of right now, the height limits correlate to the parking structures as well. Town staff has not currently made any recommendations on the text, as we have had some concerns with the height and the architectural features of the parking deck. Though since the agenda has gone out, the applicant has submitted new language, which you can see here, that addresses some of our concerns, though we still have some further concerns on the ambiguity of the architectural features, though they are working with us on that. We've also added, or not we, the applicant has added language to 12.2.1 to define the parking deck, as we have not done that in the past. And if you guys have any questions, I can answer those, or if the applicant wants to answer those, and I know they have a presentation as well.
Thank you. Are there any questions from board members? Mr. Gammon?
Just 145 feet equals how many stories?
We are not aware of how many stories that's going to equal. That may be something the applicants to speak to as of,
Okay.
yeah.
What's the existing height limit?
I believe it is 40, I had it written down, 48 feet, yeah.
Going from 48 feet to 145 feet?
Correct.
What's the highest building in town right now?
Not 145 feet.
I know that, but I mean, Jake?
I'm not sure. I believe it,
I'll try to address that. The, probably one of the tallest ones will be 52 feet. It was a conditional rezoning, and the town board approved something to go beyond 48, so it'll be 52 feet is the highest now. I will say, down in Brighton, there's a 185-foot tall allowed. That was approved back in 2005, 6, something like that. And that was at the time there was going to be a transit stop there. And so there was consideration to go fairly dense in that area. Obviously, nothing has been done at that height, but that's the highest you could do in Huntersville today at that specific location.
Any additional questions from board members?
I got a question. Has the fire department been brought in with any discussion on the height? As far as
they have been included on that yet.
I was curious if they had the equipment to handle that taller building.
That would be a
Actually,
good
I
question.
did speak with the fire chief, and due to building code, they will have to be built in a certain fashion that's safe and sprinkled. So our equipment that we have today would be sufficient.
Thankfully, I was at a meeting with the fire chief today and kind of raised that question. And basically, the ladder trucks that we have are the tallest you can get, 6 stories. And so even, as he said, in New York City, 6 stories is the best you can get. And then the stories above that, they're standpipes to provide the fire protection. So the answer to the question is they are aware. We do have ladder trucks, so we can get to the 6-story height. So thank you.
And I guess we will save additional questions until after the applicant's presentation, if that suits everybody.
We just gave her a hard drive, a thumb drive. The thumb drive's updated. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Well, I'm Susan Irvin, representing the applicant, and I would like to go, and I really appreciate everything that Nathan and Brian and staff have done working on this project. I'm here representing the applicant, but Mike Lant with North American Properties here from Atlanta, the Burkdale owner, Robert Irvin, associate with the firm, has been working on this project as well. So before I talk about the parking deck, which I think is really the only thing that needs explanation, I would like to talk a little bit about some background right one? Oh, okay, next, oh, perfect. So you, I'm sure, have all seen what's going on at Burkdale now. So that's kind of, this is a summary of that. The current project is a $20 million project. It's to be completed this fall. There are 6 new buildings, new restaurant, retail options. You might have been able to see the concierge area, the open air green space pavilion. There's a community garden, a dog park, and that pavilion also has a performance stage. There's a completely new paint scheme on all of the multifamily, all new custom designed storefronts. They've refreshed the streetscape, and there's some new venues. And I'll give you a few kind of before and after pictures if we could. On the left is kind of what it looks like now. You can go to the Burkdale website and look at live construction pictures. On the right is the finished product, and this is for the main green that goes down the center, and that is the plaza. And the next slide is just another angle showing that, again, live, construction. And then the next one shows you some images of what that will look like from the other side. And this is on the left what it looks like currently. On the right, the completed improvements with very small buildings and small restaurants and retailers. Now, you might have seen some recent press about Burkdale and what's changing at Burkdale, including the improvements that I just explained. All of these articles have been talking about the refresh of Burkdale and kind of what's coming to Burkdale. These are new retail dining and merchandise businesses and vendors that are coming, and then below that, what's being upgraded in their current location. So a lot of changes already. What I'd like to do, because I do think without going into any detail, kind of a picture's worth 1,000 words, Mike and his company have done a project in Alpharetta, Georgia called Avalon, very similar to Burkdale and to what the company's vision is for Burkdale with these changes. The first is an image, and you'll kind of see the similarities, and the idea is to have some community gathering spaces and to have a mixed-use energy in the project. The next is the hotel in that project. The next are just some images of the inside of the hotel. These are some streetscapes of the residences and the commercial on the first floor. And these are 2 of the mixed-use buildings at Avalon, very similar to what's being proposed for Burkdale. And this is an image that shows on your right is the office building. On your left is the residences with commercial on the first floor. And beyond that is the hotel, and you can see down the middle these small storefronts and restaurants and retailers, and how all of that plaza space kind of interacts with this mixed use energy. This is a lobby of one of the residences buildings. This next one is an office feature with a conference center component. We presented these design concepts to pre-development, and I'd like to share those with you. These are some hotel concepts that we're considering for the hotel, and this is a concept for the mixed-use building, and this is the concept for an office, possibly conference center concept. If you could just go back to that one slide. In this office building, the first floor is a 20-foot high floor. The second floor is also 20 feet. And then there are 6 stories above that. And then the next slide shows you the site plan that Nathan really already showed you. And one thing I wanted to mention in answer to the question about the office building, it's those 2 high stories with 6 office floors above it. So it's a total of 8 stories. And for the hotel, it's a little different because the hotel floors are only 10 feet high, but the first floor is 20 feet high. So it is a total of 12, but the first floor is a 20-foot high lobby floor. So different stories depending on, the use. Now, one of the things that I would like to talk a little bit about is the discussions that we've been having with staff about the parking deck. And the first, let's see, if you could go to the next slide. We wanted to rework this language, and this is something that we've been discussing. So the concern was that with the language that we ended up with in the packet, there was a possibility that the parking deck could be as high as the buildings, and that was not the intent. The parking deck would not be any higher than 70 feet, really less than half the height of the buildings. So what we added was the height of any associated parking deck would not exceed the lesser of the height of the hotel, or 70 feet. So it's going to be 70 feet if the hotel, for instance, is 145. So that was the first change that we suggested, just to make that clarification. And then on the next page, this is some language that we've been discussing with staff about really trying to talk a little more about the design of the parking deck. And actually, Nathan and Brian sent me this language, and Mike and I talked about it, and Mike's company is Mike's in complete agreement with this language. So what this would do is just ensure that the parking deck is going to have an architectural facade, to the extent that it's visible, that blends with, the building that's associated with it. And so this is what the purpose of this language is. And Mike was in complete agreement with that. I think I have one more slide. This is just a visual, because it's good to kind of get a visual of what it feels like when you're down on the street. What's the energy there? To the left is the office building. One of the things that is important about that is that sidewalk, which you now have in Burkdale, would be much wider, and you can see partly covered, and it is a much more of a community walking space. On the right is the hotel entrance, again, just a concept, and it kind of gives you a visual of what the feel is there at Burkdale. So that is our presentation. Without going into any more detail, we'd love to have questions and conversations from the board. If I can't answer them, there's a guy right here can answer every single one of them.
Are we looking for a recommendation today, or we just having a general discussion because the language is finalized?
I think we want to have general discussion because the language isn't finalized, and that's something that we want to work with staff and finalize and come back to you. And I'd also like to get your input and then come back at the next meeting. Our goal is to dovetail this text amendment with the rezoning date. And by doing this and moving to the next meeting for a final decision, we're still on track to do that.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. And maybe this is a question for the staff. I guess it probably is. I should have asked it before. Where else, is there any other location or zoning district in the town of Huntersville that this applies to besides Burkdale Village?
Currently, no. This would only apply to a pedestrian-oriented development under highway commercial, and currently, the only place that's permitted under that is Burkdale.
I'm going to add something It does not preclude anywhere that's zoned highway, anywhere that's zoned highway commercial could do a pedestrian-oriented development. So I just wanted to be clear, this is not just there. As long as that pedestrian-oriented development meets the standards, there's the first floor is retail, they've got a parking deck, then it could happen in other locations.
But this would be by special use permit, correct?
So the pedestrian-oriented development is allowed in a highway commercial. As they are proposing this text amendment, that additional height would then also require that special use permit. So you are correct. What they are asking for, they have said we'll jump through another hoop to do that, and that would be through the special use permit.
I'm sorry, and that would apply to other highway commercial?
Yes.
Okay.
Jack, could that also say apply to downtown if there were some rezoning going on?
If somebody rezoned the property to highway commercial, the answer to that question would be yes.
And that is a possibility for downtown?
That is a possibility. I will say, we, the staff, at this point in time, would not recommend anything other than town center in this area, right? So, I mean, that's intended for the downtown, right? Not a highway commercial zone. So we would not recommend it. We'd also, as you probably well aware, we're getting ready to update our downtown plan. And I can't imagine that downtown plan would go in this direction to say we need this kind of development in the downtown. So I just wanted to get clarity that that's not intention for having downtown,
We have
but
seen
it
people
could.
suggest that during the committee meeting.
Buildings of 140 feet? Yes, but I would say, we would, from the staff standpoint, we would not recommend any highway commercial in this area. The town center zone does what we need it to do, so I'll just leave it at that.
Can we see the language put back on the screen of the text amendment?
And then I would like to see the plan view again of the development. But you wanted to see.
No, go ahead, keep going.
And I'm talking more to the staff now. This is not what was sent to us. This is a different, and I know this is a working thing, but there was a drawing that was sent to us that showed the entire area and the site plan, and it only referenced one corner. And I didn't know whether we were talking about just the corner. It was up in the key. Since you've given us a different plan here, I can't even point it out, but.
I was under the impression that this was the only plan that we sent.
There was another page in this page. This page talked about 12 stories and.
That's still showing the same area currently for the text amendment and the rezoning. This is the only area that's being affected.
Well, we need to fix the drawings in before I know we're not going to approve anything tonight, but that needs to get corrected. And the drawing that we sent talked about 12 stories. I don't see that on here.
Yeah, so that I believe they have changed since, as I don't believe
Yeah.
This is what was filed for the reason.
I'm just saying they didn't send that to us, so I'm not sure we're looking at the same thing here. But anyway, I'm a little concerned too that if this text is approved, that it would open up the same height allowances in other areas. I know there are none on the books now, and y'all might not recommend them, but that doesn't mean it won't happen. Is there a way to restrict it just to Burkdale?
No, you can't restrict it.
Overlay district.
But this language is as tight as you can get. You'd have to pretty much build another Burkdale and ask for an SUP to get this. There's multiple layers of protection in this.
You could put an overlay district in over Burkdale that has special restrictions. That's a whole nother can of worms, but yeah.
I don't know why it wouldn't.
So
I have 3 little questions, so stay with me. And then I turned all the pages around the wrong way. Highway, commercial, pedestrian, area. It already says in there, yes, that hotels can exceed the permitted building height according to a special use permit?
Correct.
Okay, so tell
But
me.
only to 6 stories.
Only to, that, so that's why. Got it. All right. So it only goes to 6 there.
This language is specific to highway commercial zoning district and a pedestrian-oriented district, which the previous SUP is only for highway commercial.
Okay. What about the part that hotels need to be so many feet away from the rest of the production?
That would still apply. Within the language, it's, let's go here.
It is Burke.
Here.
It's in your text.
It's in our text. In this,
250.
and just this location would meet that setback requirement.
250 feet?
Yeah, keep going back. It's in staffs, yeah.
Amy, you said you had a third question?
Go ahead.
Okay, now, the hotel, you dropped the request for the height on the parking garage. So we're just, the height is just for the hotel building, is that correct? Is that all we're looking at?
There's two components here. There's the overall height for the commercial building at 145 feet, and they're offering to limit the height of the parking deck to 70 feet.
Right.
So if you look here, under A, it speaks to the separation and distance to adjoining residential and mixed-use zones.
So we're talking about 3 times 145.
500 feet.
Can't hear you.
So the distance between the building and the common lot line of adjoining residential mixed-use zone, height of approach section, common lot line. So there's got to be 3 times the height of the building, it's got to be the separation. 3 times 145 feet. So we're talking about almost 450 feet of separation.
Well, there's not even close to that. Right. The closest residential zoning district is in the backside of Burkdale, and that's, I had that number in my
But it also said
yeah. It's at
the
least
urban
about-
workspace.
we're not
It would, and that would probably be shielded by the buildings on the other side of Burkdale anyway.
And when we get into the rezoning, we've got some aerial perspectives that will show the site from different angles. We didn't want to get that confused with the text amendment today. We can bring that back next month if that's something you guys would be interested in.
The more information, the better.
Not a problem.
Go right ahead, Mr. Finley.
Yeah, the 145 and 70 seems very intentional. What if it ends up being 130, the hotel? Would the text amendment be better suited for the parking deck to be a percentage of the eventual height? Just to give us flexibility, because say if it is 120, now it's 70 and 120 instead of 145 and 70. You see where I'm going with that? And having it stated as a percentage of the height instead, 50%?
Well, I do, and I think that what we're trying to do with the parking deck is provide enough parking to meet the requirements of any of these uses. So even if you reduce the height of the hotel, the need for the parking, I think, would still be there. There might be some minor, very minor changes to the number of spaces you would need. The point of having a cap of 70 feet is so that you know that it's going to be well below the roof line of any of those buildings. But if by any chance the building were going to be lower than that 70 feet, the parking deck would have to be lower than the building. That was our point of making that. So, I mean, I see your point about in terms of ratio, but the purpose behind it is to provide enough parking
To
space.
park cars.
Right.
So it's the functionality. But even if it is 70, it still dwarfs the current 45, right? So the parking deck will be taller than some of the existing buildings beside it?
Yes, the parking deck will be taller than, certainly than the one-story or two-story buildings. Actually, there's not really, I mean, gap is maybe.
That's
consider
where
that to be-
staff has come in and suggested some of that additional language so that the exposed parking deck kind of blends in with the development and it's not, you know, a giant concrete wall as an.
Aesthetically, it has to
Aesthetically.
look right.
And like I said, what we'll do is we'll send you guys out the perspective angles from the rezoning, just you can kind of see, when you're a pedestrian and you're walking along, you're next to a 2- and 3-story building, you will not see that. But if you're driving down, say from Sanford Road, you may be able to see things from different angles. We'll send those out to you guys this week.
I have a follow-up on the parking. We're not allowing the aesthetics of this to overrule the required parking over there, are we? I mean, at one time you were talking about a much higher parking garage. We cut it to 70 probably because somebody said that's a high building, we really need that. Are we gonna have enough parking for a 12-story hotel and all the commercial around there?
They will exceed the requirement.
Is it, okay, still exceeds it at 70? Okay.
Just to be clear, the parking deck was really never intended to be higher than that. It's just that the language that we've been going back and forth with just inadvertently gave the parking deck the same height as the buildings, and that wasn't the intention.
I may be wrong, but I thought that the drawing we saw, the plan view showed showed 12 stories on the parking deck as well, but maybe I'm wrong. There was something else on there that showed 12 stories.
There was some language that could be confused that way, absolutely.
This
We
one,
cleaned
this
that up
was,
as we moved through the process.
this was on the drawing, it wasn't on the language.
No, I know exactly what document you're talking about. And yes, it could easily be confused that was a 12-story building and a 12-story parking deck. That was not their intent. And we've, like I said, we've just cleaned all this up as we worked through the process.
Go right ahead.
Ms. Allman? Both.
9.63 would cover the commercial use.
So the commercial use is the office building. If you're looking at the last picture I showed you on the street, and the office building is on the left. And so the commercial use covers the office building because, but the hotel use is on the right. And essentially, both of those buildings would be the same linear height, but because of the different uses, you have a different number of stories. Pedestrian-oriented development, it requires several things, but the thing that is the most imposing to a developer is the requirement that in a pedestrian-oriented development, you have to also have a parking deck. And so that's a very expensive structure, and so it requires a very high level of development. Expensive.
And this is, what's on the screen now is the definition of that pedestrian-oriented development, all the requirements for that. As you can see, it's pretty lengthy and
Yeah.
pretty restrictive.
And the main one, well, not the main one at all, but I mean, the one that stops people from doing pedestrian-oriented developments is, and this is just my opinion, my experience, is the second sentence. To qualify under this paragraph, at least one parking space per dwelling unit must be replaced in a parking deck which is located on the interior of the block, and at least 20% of the habitable first floor area in each block must be devoted to commercial uses. So that describes Burkdale.
Any additional questions, comments?
I don't have the, my note here, but there's one point where it talks about 73 and Highway 115. So where would Highway 115 come in as being? Yeah, I-77 and NC 115, mixed-use centers, corridor and mixed-use centers. So the 115 corridor, where's that referencing?
I'm not familiar with that language. You mind?
Land use policy recommendations in the community plan by encouraging higher density development in the I-77 and C-115 corridor and mixed-use centers.
I think she's just reading.
Yeah, is that from the 2040 community plan?
It's under reasons for requested change.
That would be from the applicant. That's one of the reasons that they're, so I would ask them.
That is just a quote from the comprehensive plan about the policy, and the quote just says that the 77 corridor, we're not talking about 115 at all for this project, but we quoted from the land use plan, which says 77 corridor and 115 corridor, talking about the importance of mixed-use nodes.
But by having 115 in that, does that mean that this amendment can affect 115 corridor?
So that is already in the comprehensive land use plan.
Right.
And the purpose of us quoting that in terms of saying that the land use plan supports a higher density is to say that that provision in the land use plan applies to the 77 corridor. That's all we were saying. We weren't suggesting that that any of this project would be on 115.
I knew not this project would be on 115, but opening the door for other projects on 115, like that.
No, I don't think that this text amendment changes the land use plan at all. I mean, I think the land use plan was adopted in December of 2020, and this won't have anything to do with that. I'm not sure I understand. Sorry.
See if I'm capturing this. So the 2040 plan said basically between I-77 and 115, that's kind of a higher intensity area, okay? So that's just the town policy. But inside the actual laws, there's highway commercial zoning. So the zoning the laws is the zoning district. So there's highway commercial zoning. We know from this language here, if somebody has highway commercial and they do all of these things, they build a deck, they have X amount of retail, they do all these things, they could do a Burkdale anywhere that's zoned highway commercial. Now, is that going to happen? No, because it's such an expensive development to do, but it could happen. And I think what you're asking is, well, if we do have a highway commercial near 115, and they are this, could they qualify for that taller building? And the answer to that is yes. Does that answer your question?
But they would have to.
That's exactly what I wanted to know.
But they would have to get a special, so they'd have to be zoned highway commercial, they would have to do all of these things to be a pedestrian-oriented, and then they would have to go through the special use permit process.
Okay. First of all, I want to applaud the developer. I think this is an excellent plan, and I think that what you're doing down there is very good for the community, no question about it. I, like a lot of others, do have some problems with a 12-story building down there, but but I also understand property rights and those kind of things, and as far as I'm concerned, you can put down there what you want to, as long as it doesn't interfere with the safety or the health of the community. Now, having said that, a lot of people don't believe that, don't go along with that. But I do have a lot of problems with the 12-story. I think, to answer your question, if this gets approved with 12 stories, it really doesn't matter anymore if somebody wants to put another one up, it's gonna go up. So, once the cat's out of the bag, it's out of the bag. So, that's my only concern. Going from a 52-foot tall building to a 145-foot tall building is, it's a big step for a small community. But doesn't mean I won't prove it. I would like to see a hard set of drawings at the next meeting before we start approving anything, because I'm a little bit confused about what I'm seeing here and what was sent earlier, and I just would like to
We'll
see
send you the
something.
latest site plan, the latest rezoning plan, as well as those perspective drawings.
Okay, I'd like for you to bring whatever the latest version is into the meeting as well.
Changes every day.
Okay, I know. That's why I said the latest version. Okay.
And I don't know if it's possible to put our thumb drive back in with the picture of the hotel from Avalon, and if you could go up to like the first slide, like the third slide or so, I think it was. I'm sorry, nope, keep going. That 11, slide 11. So the only thing that I would mention here is that a hotel that is more of a suburban hotel, like a Marriott Courtyard or something like that, is the lower height type of hotel that you're referring to. If you go to the next slide, this type of hotel is more of a luxury hotel. It's an urban hotel that goes in an urban mixed-use development like the Avalon. So it's a different, it's a much more urban setting. And so we don't have that right now in Huntersville, and that's why I wanted to share these images with you so that it would make sense kind of in that context.
Has the applicant, or does the applicant have maybe a couple of example flags that might flag this particular property?
I don't know if they're so touchy.
Just the class of flag is what I'm talking about, not anyone that you may have
You get real jumpy when you start talking about.
Thank you for the opportunity to answer your question. We would do a boutique-y style Moxie, Marriott Moxie or something like that. It has to fall into the whole context of what we're trying to accomplish here. And so, would it be a Marriott Courtyard? No.
So it's going to be more of a 4 or 5-star hotel, not a 3?
Correct.
Okay, that's kind of what I was getting at. I don't want you to reveal something you're not comfortable revealing. But I just wanted to get an idea of the class of hotel. And right now, we don't have anything like that in our community.
Correct. We're not trying to build a Hilton Garden or a Hampton Inn or anything like that. That just doesn't fit what we're trying to accomplish here. And there's another thing out there too, and one of the reasons for the height is, there's been discussion about a potential conference center associated with some of this. And if that does realize, it really helps the viability of that hotel.
It does, and we need something like that. We don't have anything like that.
It needs to be 125, 150 rooms, right? And it's going to be on such a small block, it's got to have the verticality.
Exactly. Thank you.
Did you say it could be a Moxie? It could be. I'm talking about that brand, that level. You just lost my vote. I'm not a Moxie.
It's, just think about it like a 4 or 5-star hotel. Commissioner Munger.
Thank you, Chairman. Real quick question for staff. Right now, I believe earlier you had mentioned that in Brighton, they already have approved the capability to build a 182-foot building. Just to put that in perspective, that can be built. It's already been approved. That building can go up at any point. And a question just in general for the applicant. I believe this overall project is valued at approximately $20 million. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Okay, so what would this portion of it, in approximate terms, I wouldn't hold you to a number, obviously.
Exponentially more than 20.
Well over $100 million. So just to put that in perspective, I mean, that's $100 million of project that would be coming to Huntersville. So this is a significant thing for Huntersville. I just want to make sure this board understands this is a very significant thing for our town. And I'm very obviously open to it and biased, but I like the idea in general. Just want to get that on the record.
Thank you for that, Lance. Coming right up, give me one
Well,
second, Mr. Hammond. Following on to Commissioner Munger's comments, he talked about the construction value and ultimately the tax benefits that come along with that. But the other thing that comes along with hotels that's so beneficial to communities like this is the occupancy tax, and then the dollars that parties that come in and stay at those hotels spend in our community, that ultimately stay in our community, and they're coming in from outside.
Yeah.
And that goes to offset the debt service for the parking deck across the street and that sort of thing, and it can be spent for acquiring, constructing, financing, maintaining, operating, marketing, promoting convention centers, civic centers, performing arts centers, coliseums, auditoriums, museums, off-street parking associated with those uses, tourism-related programs, arts and cultural events and festivals.
Yeah.
So for those of you that aren't aware of how that works, plus any of the other taxes that are generated while here. So it is enormously beneficial to have facilities like this in our town and keep them refreshed and up to date. If you look at Cornelius, they've got, they've seen their occupancy tax drop as their properties have become functionally obsolete. We don't necessarily want that to happen in our town. These tax revenues are extremely beneficial, and they offset a lot of expenses that taxpayers would otherwise have to fund out of property taxes.
Right, and one of the other things I wanted to throw in there that I forgot to mention, it was kind of covered briefly, is the potential for convention space within this facility. There is no convention space in North Mecklenburg. If people want to come to have some type of conventions, they have Charlotte. And I think the next closest, I could be wrong, is Statesville.
Concord.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I'll take your word for it. Concord. So this is a huge void that Huntersville could fill in. It would be fantastic for our town. So, and we do have a separate fund for tourism. And if Jackie was here, she could explain a little bit better than I can. But it helps bring more revenue into this. It's just it's a beautiful thing. So. That's it.
Thanks, Commissioner Munger.
Well, I guess I'm a third on this, because I also, Huntersville can use this. I personally don't have a problem with a 12-story or whatever hotel at Burkdale. Burkdale has, I'm sure they would tell you, have to reimagine themselves every so often to stay viable. Burkdale's been a destination for residents in surrounding areas, and this makes it even more of a destination for people even further away. This is where they'll want to stay on the interstate if they're traveling a long way, shopping, food, and the Burkdale environment. It's a great place. So I look forward to this coming back, and if with the text amendment wording all worked out.
Thank you. Any additional questions?
Hey, what's the height of the driving range, the net golf course? What is that? Is that 145?
Oh, you had to ask me that. I knew that at one point in time. 120. Give or take 120.
What is it?
I think they were ballpark 125 feet.
125?
Yeah, but that's.
But visually,
Don't quote
that's
me
the
on
height
that.
we're talking about if you're driving. Okay.
Like I said, we'll send those perspectives out this week.
Has the applicant gotten enough feedback? Are we good?
Thank you, very good. I really, really appreciate it. I really appreciate your time, and we look forward to coming back next month. Thank you
Okay,
so much.
thank you. All right, with that, we're going to move on to item 3C, which became 3B. consider a recommendation, and this may be more of a discussion for TA 22-07.
It's nice to see you all today. Yes, I will be presenting TA 2207. And it was originally for recommendation, but if you all have concerns, uncomfortable, of course, we can push it and just have discussion. So the purpose of this text amendment is to amend the town zoning ordinance to comply with Senate Bill 105. The exact language is up there on the screen and states, for parcels where multifamily structures are an allowable use, a local government may not impose a harmony requirement for permit approval if the development contains affordable housing units for families or individuals with incomes below 80% of the area median income. So something to note, a word to note in this is the term units. So the attorneys crafted this language and they consulted with the UNC School of Government before doing so. And so if the actual language for adoption, it does not say units, it says 2 or more units, because based on the feedback the attorneys got, that is what they determined units to mean. So right now, our zoning ordinance has what we call compatibility, but what the state considers harmony standards for new development. And those are our massing standards, so spacing, volume, scale, street frontage, and architectural, so what external materials are used. Y'all drawing on my PowerPoint, I see.
I thought that was something on the screen. I was gonna wipe it off.
Feel free. So,
Some tic-tac-toe going.
So this is the 80% of the area, area medium income. This was gathered from the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency. And you can see the medium income from Mecklenburg County Metro is about $96,000. And then I've highlighted, based on the family size, what 80% of that medium income would be. So this is just, okay, sorry, David messed me up. Thank you, though. Okay. Let me get back to, okay, let me refocus. So this is an example of NR as how it is written today, one of our zoning districts. And our code has allowed multifamily by right in most zoning districts since '96. So it also specifies under D general requirements that if you exceed the scale, volume, kind of mass of existing buildings, then you can demonstrate compatibility by varying the massing of your building. And we have been doing this for almost 25 years. And so the benefit of a form-based code is it pays less attention to the separation, of land uses and more attention to the form. And there are a lot of municipalities who are trying to catch up with their codes, trying to eliminate single-family zoning and kind of become more flexible as we are with multifamily. So I'm going to go through a few examples, and these are developments that do not contain affordable housing, but they are examples of how we used our harmony requirements to achieve better design. So one thing to note is that this is Sanford Road, and this is what was initially proposed. And you see 3 stories on the frontage of Sanford, and then you see kind of 4-story in the back that overlooks that single family. So with the harmony standards that we had just talked about, we were able to get this product where you see more of a gradual transition on the street front from 2 to 3 stories, and then you have that kind of 4-story contained in the middle with the 3-story on the back end, and the balconies kind of facing on the side, not toward the single family. So this is Arden Senior Living, and you can see the site highlighted in green, and you can see that there's Across from it, there's like a one-story commercial business, and then down the road, a subdivision. And originally, they had proposed 4 stories fronting on 115, and with those harmony requirements, we got them down to 3 stories in the front, and then, of course, 4 stories in the back. And then this is Caldwell Senior Living, and you can see what the site and, surrounding single family. And then what they first proposed, which was just a big, long block essentially off of Wilnox Road. And then through the harmony requirements, we were able to get them to kind of push the building back, break that up, and make it not seem as large and looming. So I provided you all right before the meeting started with some updated language. Frank had called us earlier today and talked about how where the attorneys proposed to put the language, which is the bold and underlined, black, bold, and underlined, was a little confusing and not exactly clear as to what all standards it was applying to. So you can see we just kind of moved it around in section 7 under D. Instead of having it at the end, we put it under 3, and the only part of the language we changed was instead of saying this subsection shall, we say the above provision shall. And that was just to add some more clarity as to what exactly the new language is going to apply to. Section 9, we changed, again, the subsection to the above provisions, but we also changed to add specifically the residential portion. And you'll see this at the shopfront building and the urban workplace, and that is because they are mixed-use buildings, so we wanted to ensure that the commercial portion of it still would be subject to those harmony requirements. And lastly, in section 10, this is the apartment building type, same thing, we just kind of moved that language above to make it specify what standards it's actually going to comply with. So that is the changes that were done to the ordinance that you all got right before the meeting started. And this is just a list of all the articles that are being amended. So if you all have any questions, please let me know.
I've got one. How do the courts define harmony?
That is not something I think that Emily and Jacob looked into, how the courts define harmony. I didn't see that in the
Well, the
email.
statute is the statute.
Oh, I understand that, but
And
there's
the statute is.
harmonies can be interpreted in multiple ways.
Exactly. Harmony can be interpreted many different ways, but we got what we got. So court cases aside, our attorneys said the language that we had, that compatibility language, how you can kind of show it, that was harmony as they understood the state statute. And so they said because that is akin to the harmony that the state did, we need to modify it to say that we can't require those things if there's at least 2 or more of the units that are affordable per that statute. And I'm sorry I can't answer it any better, but that's, you're on to exactly.
I mean, we have to do it because of the change, but what I'm getting at is there's likely a case somewhere where this has been interpreted because, and there was a case recently on this where there's ambiguity in zoning. I mean, I think just this week at the Court of Appeals, let me read some of this.
And I do not think that Emily had reached out specifically about the harmony wording to the UNC School of Government, so that is something that we could see if would be possible before the next meeting.
Yeah, there's likely a definition somewhere, and the way the courts define, if there are 2 or more, reasonable interpretations of something, it's, vague. Let's see. Okay, when there are 2 or more reasonable interpretations of a law, the law is ambiguous. When an ambiguous law is a zoning regulation, we should adopt a reasonable interpretation that favors the free use of property. from a current case from this week. That being said, having a better definition of harmony, I think, would help because and we have to do this, obviously, but does harmony apply to architectural standards, I guess, is one of the things I'm questioning. I understand it's applying to the massing of buildings, the size and the scale and all that. Does it actually apply to architectural standards? Do we need to apply it to architectural standards?
So here's what we'll do. We will get with the town attorney. So we're not asking for action. You guys are just getting this for the first time. So we will ask the attorney to look at that case law and help address that question. Let me just give you Jack's back of the envelope opinion what's happened. In 1996, the town wrote a code that was very flexible for developers. We didn't have a minimum lot size in the NR zone. We didn't have a minimum lot width. We allowed apartments by right. And this is Jack's interpretation. As a result of the state statutes changing and taking more rights away from local government, the things that we used to control, we can't control anymore. And what might happen is they might shoot their foot off and that we have to go more restrictive in our rules and regulations because we no longer have that ability. And that, to me, is really unfortunate because there has been a lot of flexibility in the code, but there comes a point where if we can't ask for certain things, then we need to probably modify the codes. And in fact, I'm telling you, the town board is going to be meeting later this month, I believe, and talking about possible code changes. So I just get that out there to say, changes can occur as a result of what's happening from the state. But to answer your specific question, I think it's a good one that we'll ask the attorneys to look at the case law and see if they could provide some more definition.
Yeah, it's just primarily related to the architectural standards. Do we actually need to provide an exemption there? And if we have a better understanding of harmony, that may give us some guidance as to whether we should or should not provide that exemption. So, Mr. Gammon.
Well, the first thing to remember is that this is a state statute. It is law. I guess it's, as long as we interpret it correctly and word it correctly, this is it. But going back to the examples that you used earlier and adding one, if you look at neighborhood residential in the first page under general requirements, go to item 3. In the middle of the paragraph, it says at a minimum, observe a front setback of 40 feet and a lot width of 90 feet. If this 160 change from the state statute, that no longer applies. The developer, if he has multi-family structures and puts in 2 affordable housings that meets the 80% criteria, they can put the lot size as what they want. Okay, that's the question. I want to see I'm looking for the impact of this on our zoning ordinance.
Yeah, so the impact is really just to these multifamily developments that provide affordable housing. We really have not had that much affordable housing, and it is just specific to these D1 general requirements under the zoning district and then to the architectural requirements under the 3 different building types where we allow multifamily.
Right, and I absolutely have no opposition to affordable housing. That's not a problem here. It's just, it's the town being able to enforce its zoning ordinance. So if the developer comes in and he says, I'm going to do a 30 by 80 lot, so we say, no, you have to do a 40 by 90, but when I read this section, it says this shall not apply. So that's my question. My interpretation tells me that this negates some of our zoning ordinance.
I would say forget about lot size. Just lot size is not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is multifamily. Can we go to the state statute? What we're talking about is multifamily housing, and if multifamily housing, which is 3 or more units, if multifamily housing has at least 2 units that are affordable, then we can't ask for changes of the architecture to blend in with the area. That's basically a quick summation of what is happening. Yes.
So Jack, you mean just the architectural and things like that, not the buffer and the setback or any of those other
Correct.
ordinances, just that?
Just the, you know, like when we tell somebody, well, you're next to a 1-story house and you want a 3-story building, you need to go 2-story and then 3-story. So we would not be able to do that type of thing, that gradual blending, if you will.
Could you?
So this is just for, this is not for, let's say, a subdivision.
correct.
This is for, unless that subdivision within it has townhomes and apartments.
Multifamily that has affordable housing. Now, bear in mind, the apartments that we've had, nobody, to our knowledge, has proposed affordable housing units. But could a developer say, I'm going to have, of my 300 units, 2 of them are affordable so that I don't have to do changes to my architecture? The answer to that question would be yes.
Which goes back to Caitlin's examples that she gave us, that they would not have to make the alterations in the number of floors. They could have a massive 4-story building.
Correct.
And you say it does, is only for multi, yeah, right here, okay.
That's all I have.
It might not affect the subdivision because it doesn't have multifamily, but multifamily is right next to a subdivision. So can somebody come in, developer come in and propose that's on the screen right now is all, I don't know what it's called now, but Section 8 or whatever you want to call it, affordable housing, right there, 4 stories tall, and jam it right up against the neighborhood? And there's no setback. The setbacks don't apply, right? So they don't apply to that, but it'll affect these people, the single-family housing.
Well, I mean, that's why we.
So do we have no way to protect them under this thing?
If this development had affordable housing, 2 affordable housing units, we would not have been in a position to say, this is not blending with the neighborhood.
But more than that, what if it's 100% affordable housing?
It's still, we couldn't do anything.
I know.
Right, we couldn't do anything.
So that's going to hurt these people in these single-family housing, right?
Well, I mean, let me just say, I think the people in the single-family housing think any apartments have a negative
Well, I
impact
agree.
regardless.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that,
But at
we
least
already
you've
had
got
that
some
discussion.
way
Right.
to mitigate it.
Right.
Now you won't.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So,
Mr. Gammon?
I'm sorry, I got to follow up with this. So in effect, what I'm hearing you tell me, the wording that I'm reading here, which says this subsection shall not apply to developments on parcels, what I hear you saying is that this subsection shall not apply to multifamily developments. Or structures.
Right, yeah.
Frank, if you look at the statute and you look at the wording of it, can you put the statute change back up? It's very, very clear for parcels where multifamily structures are allowed.
I totally agree.
They're mimicking that language in the change. Sorry, go ahead.
I apologize. But when it reads, this subsection shall not apply to developments on parcels where multifamily, and I look up above and I see bullet 1, 2, 3, 4, the way it's written, it tells me that this does not apply. That's where my question is.
Right, yeah, so we tried to address it kind of quickly with changing some of that language around. That's why you all got the new language right before. And so it is not final. We probably still need to go through and make.
I'm trying to figure out what's not clear on this.
I'm sorry, Jack. What I'm saying is that when I read, I look at this that's written, and I'm just focusing on neighborhood residential right now, as an example. And it lists everything that's written above as a subsection. Everything. But the last bullet says, this subsection shall not apply to development on parcels where multifamily structures are an allowable use and development can to them. It leads me to read it to say that, let's say I have one of the developments here that has all townhomes. it's a multifamily structure, and they put two affordable housing units in there, then none of this applies to those townhomes.
So I think what was meant by when it says this subsection, the intent.
And I apologize, I'm sorry. I'm just dense, excuse me.
You're fine, Frank. Is that, it's always under, at least for the changes to the zoning district, the D general requirements, but then it's generally just under that one. So you have D, which is kind of like a subsection of the district page itself, and then you have 1, which is like another subsection, and this is another subsection of 1. So it's not a subsection of just D, all the general requirements, it's just that subsection of 1, or maybe 2 in the other districts. I would have to look through these. But the intent was not to say that all the general requirements would not be applicable anymore. Is that kind of what you were getting at, Frank?
Yes, yes, but but the way it's written, it leads me, maybe I'm alone, leads me to believe it applies to all of the bullets.
Okay, yeah.
But I see it's a bullet that basically is standing on its own. Maybe the wording could be different to make someone, as dense as I understand it, better.
Yeah, and we have
Frank, I'm seeing what you're saying here. So let me see if I can kind of illustrate this a little better for everybody. The way there are multiple interpretations that someone could pull out of this language, in my opinion. So this subsection shall not apply to development on parcels where multifamily structures are allowable use and the development contains 2 or more affordable housing units for families or individuals. Well, someone could in theory build a duplex that had 2 units, and then they build numerous other structures that are not necessarily in harmony, that aren't necessarily multifamily structures. It needs just a little bit more work to say multifamily development, where it's drilled down as to very specific, the units have to be in a multifamily building. That's, I think, where he's coming from, and I'm kind of seeing that too. There just needs to be a little bit more clarity. We've got to mimic, obviously, the statute.
Right.
But I think there just needs to be a little bit more definition there and clarity and specificity as to exactly the structure type on the specific parcel that the affordable housing units have to be in. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, that makes sense, and that's why me and Jack talked about it after Frank called, and we tried to make some quick changes, as you guys had seen, but we were definitely not done with making changes. We wanted to go over with the changes we made with the attorneys as well. So we will definitely take that feedback.
It just needs a few words there, just to make it very, very clear
More
that the
specific.
units have to be in a multifamily building to trigger the exception.
Right.
Not just a multifamily, not just a parcel where a multifamily structure is allowable. The units have to be in a multifamily building.
I see, yep.
Yes, it can't just
Right.
be 2 units and then they go do something completely different on the same parcel and then that blow out the harmony requirement. There's a way, I think, that this could be interpreted in different directions. So I think a little bit more detail, just echoing what Mr. Gamnon brought up, would be beneficial in this particular case.
Yeah, I definitely understand that.
Any
Work on that.
Any additional questions, comments as it relates to this particular agenda item? No? Staff, any additional comments? Okay, thank you, staff. And we're moving on to item 3C, which was 3D. Consider a recommendation and/or discussion for TA 22-10.
I have 16 minutes to present. Okay, so we don't need action on this. The key is, what do you feel comfortable? Are there things you want us to provide more clarity on? So just like the other cases, you don't need to act on this tonight. So our ordinance that reads today, only one principal building and its customary accessory buildings may be erected on any lot except that multiple buildings which taken together compose a single principal use may be erected on a single lot as permitted by the district regulations and described by the building lot type. Requirements of the subdivision ordinance of section 6.8 apply. So in other words, we allow multiple buildings to occur on one property. Now, a more traditional thing that you see, and Matt and I had this discussion yesterday, your shopping centers. It's not unusual that you'll have multiple buildings on one lot. This is Rosedale and Market Square, and you'll see that in the blocks, there's multiple buildings and there's not lot lines between them. So that's been the typical thing that we have seen, and so that's the typical multi-building site. However, just recently, we had the hamlet at Huntersville come to the town, and that had all single family, and this was the first single-family renting subdivision to come in Huntersville. So they too did multi-building site. So they have, these homes are not on individual lots. These homes are on common area, and people rent the units. During the discussion with the developer, a board member asked, well, what happens if you go belly up? Can you sell some of these homes off individually? Could you subdivide and sell homes? The answer was no, because it would be really difficult to come back after the fact and try to meet your subdivision regulations at this point in time. Staff has concerns about that. We don't want to prohibit, we can't regulate the rental of homes, but we can regulate density and lots and all that kind of stuff. So this is what we are proposing. We are proposing adding a sentence at the end of this section that says the multiple building exception should not apply to single-family homes and duplex house types that are not a part of a retirement community or congregate care facility. Now, you might say, well, why did you remove those two, right? So what this would mean is this would not prevent somebody from doing a rental home community, but they will have to have each of these homes, if this is approved, on its own individual lot. Okay, so each of these homes would be on their own individual lot, and they would have to meet the subdivision regulations, okay? Here is 3 retirement communities. The left is the first one we had, was Glens at Birkdale's duplexes, and so those are rental. And those are actually all rental. The courtyards at Huntersville and the courtyards at Kinnaman, it's all common land, but that's a condo. So they have units, that people buy the interior airspace, if you will, of those homes. So you actually pay a pretty good sum for owning the airspace of it. I will say that the courtyards, the development has not, it has caused some problems with these condos. So their next development that they did in Huntersville, they created lot lines. And that's the courtyards at Eastfield Farm, which is on Eastfield Road, and it's already sold out. Those are all on individual lots. So they're kind of moving away from this condo, if you will. The Congregate Care Facility, I don't know if anybody noticed, but the Hope House off North Cross Drive, what's interesting there is they provide transitional housing for mothers and children. And they had come up with an idea of, we would like to have some tiny homes at the back of our site that would allow a transition from folks to go inside this shared house. And then, so if you see at the back of the house, there's actually 3 little tiny homes in a courtyard, and that's part of their transitional housing. So we didn't want to prevent something like that to happen. So that's kind of the language that we, so we came up with this language right here. So that's and this would also now blend our definition of single family says that it's on an individual lot. So it actually kind of starts to align, because parts of our ordinance are not really aligned with one another. So this would then cause these single-family homes to be on individual lots. It wouldn't preclude somebody from doing a rental community. It just means you'd have to do lot lines, and we would check it through the subdivision process. And, if by some chance they went belly up, then they could sell individual lots, or they could sell it all at one time to one individual. So it does have some flexibility, and I know that this might generate a whole lot of questions and discussion, but that's the concept, okay? So with that, happy to answer any questions that we have. And again, we do not have to have resolution on this.
So no minimum lot size requirements for this type of use, is that correct?
Right, so in our neighborhood residential towns, a lot of our zones don't have a minimum lot size or minimum lot width. So if they, let's just go to this. So they could have narrower lots, but when you go below 50 foot wide, you do have to have rear access to that lot.
So what zoning applies to this use? What, if it has to follow under what zoning requirements?
Well, every zoning district would have to have a house on its own lot. If that,
So what would keep you from building something like that? Do they have to be rental, or could they be a whole subdivision full of tiny houses?
they could be,
Very small lots.
and that could happen today. That's actually been the law since 1996. So this is not anything new. It's just been the law since 1996 that no minimum lot size, no minimum lot width, and we never can get to regulate how big a house is. Did that answer your question?
So I was just going to use an example that you and I, only because it's fresh on my mind. So zone GR,
General residential.
general residential. You could come into an area that's zone general residential, and you could cram it full of these tiny houses.
You have picked the one zone you can't do it to. You have picked the one zone you can't do it to.
That's great.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot. So let me try to explain this. Take a second to explain this. The town adopted all new code, a zoning code and subdivision code in 1996. And all of the developments that happened up to 1996 were basically large lot, single-family developments. And what the town did was designate those properties as GR. So they're single-family. If it's not already subdivided, you got to have at least a 20,000 square foot lot. Don't hold me to this. I think your width has to be at least 90 foot wide on the street. So that rule, that's not going to affect this. Yeah, that is not going to affect this. What this is going to affect is all the other districts that didn't have that standard, that don't have a minimum lot size or a lot width. But GR zone does. And I say it was the only zone. We have a rural zone and a transition zone, which also have some fairly strict density limits. And so those kind of three zones are ones that won't get affected by this. But they all have lots anyways. I mean, there's not a development that happens in GR, TR, or that's not, lot lines.
Okay, got it.
This is the very first. This is the very first, and could be more. I also will say, we have been approached on multiple occasions from folks that want to do these rental communities, and probably half of them have lot lines. This one just didn't. So it's not like the standard of rental single-family communities don't have lot lines. It just, in this particular case, they don't. Some do, some don't.
Okay. My question is, if this project had come in and didn't have lot lines and we have the ordinance in place, what kind of cost would that be for a developer to draw have those lot lines drawn?
Show the lot lines. Well, I will say, because they're rear access, I don't think, let me see if I can get I'm not sure this is, I was trying to get the laser pointed to work, but if you can look, you'll see parking lots kind of spread out here, there, and everywhere. Those would have had to convert to like a rear drive access to each of those lots. And to be frank, I'm going to just say from our staff reviewing standpoint, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because when the first plans came in, those parking lots were a far way away from those those homes. And so through the review process, we got the parking lots in proximity to the homes that they're going to serve.
Mr. Whitaker.
My question is, if this new policy was in place, the change here would be that each one of these would have to be on a lot, single lot, right? That's what we're saying.
That is correct, yes, sir.
And because, now, just what I heard you just say, because they're on a single lot, a lot has to have a parking spot on it, a garage or a parking spot. You said they had to have rear alleys and stuff, but
Yeah,
they couldn't still have this central parking, even though the lots were.
They could have central parking. We actually have subdivisions with parking driveways,
Yeah.
but then they put parking lots because for visitors, for tight developments.
But they would have to add individual parking pads or something on each lot. Is that a requirement?
Each of those lots would be 1.5, depends on number of bedrooms, but yes, you have one space per home, one bedroom, and then if it's more than one bedroom, it's 1.5 spaces.
Well, to answer your question, the individual lots would be a substantial cost to a developer, I believe, but.
Well, so they're building parking lots anyways, so the spaces are going to be on the lots themselves.
I know, but it's.
Yeah, it's going to have an impact.
Survey costs would be tremendously more, but that's okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's
That's fine, yeah.
that's every development, yeah.
Any additional questions?
I have one.
Mr. Gammon, go right ahead.
Or really, it's a comment, and that is, I don't have a problem with this moving forward. Added to that, I'll add a statement that I made at the planning board meeting when Hamlet came through. And I would recommend or ask the planning department to look at these rental subdivisions and determine, maybe the answer is they don't need it, but do we need another zoning district in our zoning ordinance? Because there are things here that are different than a regular subdivision. A question I didn't ask, and I don't remember an answer, who's doing these roads here? Who maintains the roads inside this subdivision?
So all the roads are public, so the developer's going to build them, town will inspect them, and if they comply with the town construction standards, then the town would accept them.
Okay. Like normal, like any subdivision?
Like any subdivision,
Right.
correct.
But I'm saying there may be and there may not be items that are specific to a rental subdivision that are different than a normal, regular subdivision. And I recommend that be looked at to determine if there are some changes to our zoning ordinance or another zoning district. That's all I had, Matt.
Any additional questions, comments, concerns? No. Jack, as we talked the other day, I think about ordinances and how flexible and adaptive they could be. And when you look at the definition of a subdivision in our ordinance and via statute, subdivision is either dividing a parcel into multiple parcels, or it's a parcel with multiple building sites on it. So this qualifies as a subdivision, even though it's a single parcel, because it has multiple buildings on it.
And it has public streets too, so it already is, so you're exactly right, this is a subdivision.
So I guess the comment was, what if this blows up? Could you sell them individually? Could they go back and get a site plan approved, bust it up in individual lots? The simplest thing to do would they could just make a condo association, do it that way. But I guess my concern is if we're worried about one specific type of rental real estate and that particular concern of a foreclosure or a, insolvency of the developer or the owner of the property, and it just happens to be single-family rental, why do we not have the same concern for every other form of rental real estate in this town? Hotels, multifamily, office, industrial, flex, retail. And is there a net benefit to the town of forcing someone into subdividing property when they really don't want to?
Yeah, so First off, I would say forcing someone to do it is not the term I would use. I would say, if you want to build in Huntersville, here's your rules. And it's up to the town board to decide.
Forcing somebody.
And that's, so that's with everything. Let me just talk to you just conceptually about the commercial side of things, just to answer your question about subdividing. Huntersville, since 1996, said every building shall front a public street or open space, okay? So I want to use Rosedale, and we can say Market Square is a good example of this. What you have are public streets through there. The beauty of that is that the public infrastructure, the utilities, everything is in there, the public streets, the easements for the utilities, everything is in there such that if somebody wants to subdivide it out and break up pieces, it's already there. Everything is there today. Contrast that with your typical old shopping center where you have a sea of parking and a building in the back and some out parcels. And it's all one big parcel. And what happens, it's a slow death. What I'm describing to you is the main store goes out, then a second tier goes in, and then the out parcels start to go down, and it dies a slow death. You see that all over the United States of America, right? This situation, we've got the public streets, the public infrastructure there. It can modify per an update. And I would just say Birkdale Village is a great example of it. Birkdale Village they're updating before they die, right? They're update where they're highly successful and they're already looking to how do we rework it. So my point to that, Matt, is from 1996 to now, the town rules have provided basically the infrastructure so that these could all be subdivided off and sold off, and it could incrementally change as it needs to, as opposed to the example I gave you, which is a slow death of a shopping center, and then somebody has to buy the whole thing. Think of Eastland Mall. Somebody's got to buy the whole thing, which is a big deal, and then try to redevelop it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the way I would answer your question, is why not the others? Well, we've already set up the infrastructure to handle that. When you talk about single family, though, the single family, these lots, they couldn't just come in here and show lot lines because now all of a sudden they're not meeting the residential subdivision standards that we have. And that's the difference.
All he's got to do is declare a couple of those affordable housing and he's free.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, it is easier to redevelop a parcel if it's only under one owner.
Yeah.
Just throwing that out there.
No, and
If this
they
thing goes
can
down,
own-
it's easy to
They can
sell
own
it.
every one of those lots too. So we're not taking the rights of anyone away by doing this. So anyways, that's the rationale. We are here to answer any questions. We're a little bit over. This is a lot of change, but we are happy to stay as long as you want us to, happy to answer any questions that you have, and you might think of some later. And so if you do, send them to us and then we'll email it to everybody so that everybody's on the same page the next time we get together. The text amendment that Kaylee brought and the text amendment of this is not going to public hearing till next month, and there's going to be another ordinance advisory board meeting. So if you make a recommendation on either Kaylee's amendment or this one, we will present it at the public hearing.
And that's my question, Matt. Do we want this to come back, or do we want to move it forward now?
Well, I've got a couple of other concerns, Jack. I know I've voiced these to you. So I feel like there's some unintended consequences. You cited the Hope House, as something that now you've made a provision for that, and you've made a provision for age-restricted housing. But I think there are other situations that are outside of those two particular categories where this could have a negative impact. And again, I'm just trying to understand what is the true net benefit to the town by creating an additional condition, requirement, restriction, however we want to couch it, in a situation like this. What is the benefit? And then, I feel like there's a litany of ways this could be challenged in the courts. And that's another big issue I've got, and I've talked to you about that as well. So I just think there needs to be a lot of serious consideration about this particular text amendment. And if we're going to do it for this, you know, we're kind of singling out this one particular form of rental real estate. You know, why not make a hotel developer structure as a condo, so if it blows up, he can condo all the units, or a multifamily developer, force them into a condo association. When they blow up, they can sell everything off as a condo unit. I mean, that's kind of the example.
My comment would be, we just want to treat this like we have every other subdivision, so get them on individual lots, and you can own all of them, or you can have individuals. So this would be treated just the same as every subdivision that's been approved in Huntersville since really 1996. But all fair questions. There probably are many others, and we're happy to answer them. Obviously, we'll talk to the attorney to make sure we're not proposing anything that we think will get us in a lawsuit, but we will take whatever time we have. We have another 30 days. We'll look closely at those issues and any other issues that you might have.
Mr. Gammon?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right.
But I have something I want on the record first, though. An apology.
Thank you, staff, for your time.
Yeah, when we were discussing 2207, the Senate Bill 105, I want to apologize to this board because I talked over the chair and I talked over my neighbor here a couple of times. All right? That's not my normal way I operate, and I'll try to do better next time. I make a motion that we adjourn.
Hey, Frank, no harm, man. We're good. Do we have a second on the motion to adjourn? Second? Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you for everybody's time today.
You're going to be busy next meeting.